Hello, today we're here again. We're going to talk about Shakespeare's Macbeth. We're specifically today going to look at the repeated idea of zoomorphism, or the repeated use of zoomorphism by Shakespeare throughout the play, specifically when he's describing, or other characters are describing, the character of Macbeth. If you're not sure what zoomorphism is, it's where we make comparisons with animals. We do get zoomorphic similes and zoomorphic metaphors throughout the play. There's loads of them. We've put some on that first slide, but we're only going to look at 4 of them today in a little bit more detail.
Okay, so the first one from Act 1, Scene 2 is where Macbeth is compared to the lion. I like this as an AO2 quote because it's one word, so that's really easy to remember, and yet there's still kind of lots of things we can say about it. So, first thing, a little bit obvious, start off with the simple thing. Lions are king of the jungle, and that is potentially foreshadowing that Macbeth is going to go on to be king later on in the play. As Macbeth and Banquo are fighting from the start, this is the captain's description of them, and Macbeth is compared to the lion as an animal that's strong and brave and violent and all those kind of connotations of that. There's also some ideas around the fact that lions live in groups where the females might be more dominant, or might be kind of the hunters, and so maybe there's a sort of suggestion about Lady Macbeth's dominance through that as well. Macbeth is referred to singularly as the lion, whereas when he's with Banquo he's referred to, or they're both referred to, as eagles, and that makes it clear that Macbeth is different to Banquo. Initially it seems that he's stronger, braver potentially, but as the play progresses we see that's not necessarily the case. It's just his violence and his sort of tendency to take things too far. When we put an eagle and a lion together, they make a griffin, which is like a creature from mythology, and it's linked to nobility and royalty, and that shows that kind of both Macbeth and Banquo have royal connections. Obviously Macbeth goes on to be king, Banquo's children will be kings, and there's also a sense that maybe they'd be better together, because it's a noble, sort of a rare creature, they'd be better together. This initial zoomorphism, I think, sort of foreshadows the fact that Macbeth is going to go on to behave in a way that isn't human. Lions are instinctive, and as the play progresses, Macbeth becomes sort of reactionary and not thoughtful like a human would be. So maybe there's a bit of foreshadowing that he's going to lose his humanity. And then lastly, sort of, we have that idea of bravery around lions, which is an interesting idea, and Macbeth is referred to as brave Macbeth. But bravery isn't something that we associate with right or wrong. You can be brave doing something wrong, and so Macbeth is brave, and at this point it seems like a good quality, but ultimately it's not.
I think as well, if you look at the coat of arms from the royal families at this time, the lion is the predominant animal, so they were very, very aware of the imagery surrounding a lion, which makes it a really valid thing to talk about. So well done, Miss. Okay, so the next example is a lovely, as I've said before, I love paired quotes. So we've got that first one, the idea of Macbeth being the lion, and then Lady Macbeth, when she's trying to influence Macbeth or convince Macbeth to kill Duncan while he stays over, she refers to him like the cat in the adage, which of course is a zoomorphic simile. The cat, basically, from the adage, is a cat. So an adage is an old story that has a meaning, a moral to it, and it's basically a cat was looking at a fish. It doesn't want to get its paws wet. While it's trying to pluck up the courage to get its paws wet, the fish swims away, and this is very much representing the idea that Duncan's only staying one night. If Macbeth doesn't take his opportunity now because he's scared, then the metaphorical fish, Duncan, will swim away. He won't get another opportunity like this. Obviously, she's undermining his masculinity and bravery. Cats are associated with being scared, being skittish. They're also much smaller than the lion that has been compared to previously. Domesticated animals are lower down on the chain of being, which I think is a point. Yeah, we'll just put that. And the idea of him being downgraded for a lion suggests that maybe he's not what he appears to be. She doesn't see him as this brave person because he's scared in this moment, and she's trying to shame him. It does make the regicide seem simple, comparing it to just a cat catching a fish. I've mentioned the cat is lower on the chain of being than the lion, so she's downgraded him further down that chain of being. And last thing of all is, if you like the interpretation of Lady Macbeth being like a witch and she's calling upon spirits, cats were thought to be, in King James's demonology, they were thought to be a popular familiar of witches, and you could be suggesting that she controls him in a way that a witch would control their familiar.
Okay, so this one with the comparison to the bear, again, another zoomorphic simile. They have tied me to a stake, but bear-like, I must fight. There's obviously some things that I could talk about in that sentence, but just focusing on the zoomorphism. This is Act 5, so this is the very end of the play where Macbeth realises that he's going to struggle to get away with this, that the castle's under threat and that he's likely to die. He sees himself here as a bear. Obviously we've still got that sense of a predatory, strong animal, and I think that is a fairly consistent thing for Macbeth, that he's a fighter, and he doesn't really lose that throughout the course of the play. He sees himself as brave, when everybody else saw him as brave at the start, and now it's that he'll sort of stay and fight even though he's aware that he's likely to die. There's this thread that we're seeing quite often with these multiple references, sort of subtle references to witches, and I think this is potentially another one that is tied to a stake like a witch would be, and that might be acting as that constant reminder of the influence that those initial prophecies and the subsequent prophecies have had on Macbeth's life. He's still that predatory animal. In Act 1 Scene 2 he's the lion, and here he's a bear. There's that question about whether or not he actually ever changes. I think he doesn't really change. The difference is, in Act 1 Scene 2 he's fighting for his country, and so that kind of violence and aggression is patriotic, and therefore we, sort of the audience, would value that. Whereas this same behaviour, now more selfishly motivated, is less sort of impressive, less appealing to the audience. Bear baiting. So bear baiting is tying a bear with a, you would tie it to a stake, and then it would be a series of dogs that would be sent to fight the bear. In bear baiting, realistically, the bear will lose. The bet is often how many dogs will it take to kill the bear, rather than will the bear win or will the dog win, and therefore that's that sort of acceptance that Macbeth has that he's going to die. He knows that, but he's going to fight anyway. Yeah, that's what I've said. And lastly, so contextually, the theatre would have competed with bear baiting. So you'd go out, you'd decide, what do I want to see today? Do I want to go to the theatre, or do I want to go really close nearby and watch bear baiting instead? So this is a reference that Jacobean audience would really understand, and there are many other references to bear baiting in Shakespeare's plays. There's an argument that the reason Macbeth is so violent, it's one of his more violent plays, is because of Shakespeare's sort of desire to compete with the pull of bear baiting, and his kind of understanding of the fact that his audience really like bloody things, and would be tempted away by that.
Okay, and the last one we're going to talk about is Macduff in the final confrontation with Macbeth. Commands him, turn, hellhound, turn. And I like this one just because it shows that sort of fire. It's the last piece of zoomorphism in the play, and it really shows the descent of Macbeth. First thing I'll say, a hound is a domesticated dog used to hunt, which could suggest that after all Macbeth was just being manipulated all the way through. He was killing because he was being told to do so, as opposed to what he actually would have done naturally. Whether you believe that was manipulated by the witches or Lady Macbeth or whoever, it's this idea that he's lacked an independent thought. The demonic dogs thought to serve Satan. Obviously, he's killed King Duncan, who was God's representative on earth. It's an act that would please Satan. It reminds the audience of when Macduff previously calls him a hell kite, which is another quote that I could talk about, but both zoomorphic comparisons Macduff makes associates Macbeth with hell, and I think it's just a reminder for the audience, which should be the next bullet point, that this idea that Macbeth is going to go to hell. Macbeth is going to be punished for the regicide, for all his actions that he's done, and that's sort of Shakespeare's message to the audience, to the people watching, in support of King James, and to hopefully prevent other people trying to take the life of King James. I think that's it. There are more other examples that you could look at. There's full of scorpions in my mind, and various other ones, but we just tried to focus on 4 for you today. Thanks.